Welcome back. We are in the NazActs, book 9. We're up to chapter 12. And so there's this discussion going on about whether the world is governed by the providence of Yah, or whether it's this thing called Genesis, which is similar to your horoscope, or the time that you're born, the way the stars are aligned. And so there's this whole debate going on right now. So we'll just go ahead and jump back into it. Therefore, the astrologers, being ignorant of such mysteries, think that these things happen by the courses of the heavenly bodies. Hence also in their answers to those who go to them to consult them as to future things, they are deceived in very many instances. Nor is it to be wondered at, for they are not prophets, but by long practice the authors of errors find a sort of refuge among those things by which they were deceived, and introduce certain climacteric periods, that they may pretend a knowledge of uncertain things. For they represent these climacterics as times of danger, in which one sometimes is destroyed, sometimes is not destroyed, not knowing that it is not the course of the stars, but the operation of demons that regulates these things. And those demons, being anxious to confirm the error of astrology, deceive men to sin by mathematical calculations, so that when they suffer the punishment of sin, either by the permission of Yahweh or by legal sentence, the astrologer may seem to have spoken truth, and yet they are deceived even in this. For if men be quickly turned to repentance, and remember and fear the future judgment, the punishment of death is remitted to those who are converted to Yahweh by the grace of baptism. But someone will say, many have committed even murder and adultery and other crimes, and have suffered no evil. This indeed rarely happens to men, but to those who know not the counsel of God it seems frequently to happen. But Yahweh, who knows all things, knows how and why each sinner sins, and what cause leads each one to sin. Therefore, in general, it should be noticed that if any are not evil in their heart as they are in their actions, and are not moved to sin under the motivation of intention, upon them punishment is inflicted more speedily and mostly in the present life. For everywhere and always God renders to everyone according to his deeds, as he judges to be expedient. But those who practice wickedness on purpose, so that they sometimes even rage against those from whom they have received benefits, and who take no thought for repentance, their punishment he defers to the future. Because unlike those of whom we spoke before, these men do not deserve to pay the punishment of their crimes in the present life. Rather, it is permitted that they occupy the present time as they desire, because their correction is not such as to need temporal chastisements, but such as to demand the punishment of eternal fire in hell. And there their souls shall seek repentance, where they shall not be able to find it. But if, while in this life, they had placed before their eyes the punishments which they shall then suffer, they would certainly have bridled their lust, and would in no wise have fallen into sin. For the understanding in the soul has much power for cutting off all its desires, especially when it has acquired the knowledge of heavenly things, by means of which, having received the light of truth, it will turn away from all darkness of evil actions. For as the sun obscures and conceals all the stars by the brightness of his shining, so also the mind, by the light of knowledge, renders all the lusts of the soul ineffective and inactive, sending out upon them the thought of the judgment to come as its rays, so that they can no longer appear to the soul. But as a proof that the fear of Yahweh has much efficacy for the repressing of lust, take the example of human fear. Who is there among men that does not covet his neighbor's goods? And yet they are restrained and act honestly, though through fear of the punishment which is prescribed by the laws. Through fear, nations are subject to their kings, and armies obey with arms in their hands. Slaves, although they are stronger than their masters, yet through fear submit to their master's rule. Even wild beasts are tamed by fear. The strongest bulls submit their necks to the yoke, and huge elephants obey their masters through fear. But why do we use human examples when even divine are not wanting? Does not the earth itself remain under the fear of the precept which it testifies by its motion and quaking? The sea keeps its prescribed bounds, the angels maintain peace, the stars keep their order, and the rivers their channels. It is certain also that demons are put to flight by fear. And not to lengthen the discourse by too many particulars, see how the fear of God, restraining everything, keeps all things in proper harmony and in their fixed order. How much more, then, may you be sure that the lusts of demons which arise in your hearts may be extinguished and wholly abolished by the admonition of the fear of God, when even the inciters of lust are themselves put to flight by the influence of fear. You know that these things are so, but if you have anything to answer, proceed. I would say from these examples that Peter uses, it seems like the one thing in nature that doesn't really have the fear of God is mankind. You know, the animals generally behave the way they're supposed to, and of course the creation behaves the way it's supposed to. It's just it just seems to be mankind that is more prone to rebellion. Then said the old man, my son Clement has wisely framed his argument, so that he has left us nothing to say to these things, but all his discourse which he has delivered on the nature of men has this bearing, that along with the fact that free will is in man, there's also some cause of evil without him, whereby men are indeed incited by various lusts, yet are not compelled to sin, and that for this reason, he said, because fear is much more powerful than they, and it resists and checks the violence of desires. So that, although natural emotions may arise, yet sin may not be committed. Those demons are put to flight who incite and inflame these emotions. But these things do not convince me, for I am conscious of certain things from which I know well, that by the arrangement of the heavenly bodies men become murderers or adulterers and perpetuate other evils, and in like manner honorable and modest women are compelled to act well. In short, when Mars, holding the center in his house, regards Saturn quarterly with Mercury toward the center, the full moon coming upon him in the daily Genesis, he produces murderers. And those who are to fall by the sword, bloody, drunken, lustful, devilish men, inquirers into secrets, malefactors, sacrilegious persons, and such like, especially when there was no one of the good stars looking on. But again, Mars himself, having a quarterly position with respect to Venus in a direction toward the center, while no good star looks on, produces adulterers and incestuous persons. Venus with the moon in the borders and houses of Saturn, if she was with Saturn and Mars looking on, produces women that are loud and insufferable, ready for agriculture, building, and every manly work, to commit adultery, with whom they please, and not to be convicted by their husbands, to use delicacy, no ointments, nor feminine robes and shoes, but to live after the fashion of men. But the unpropitious Venus makes men to be as women, and not to act in any respect as men. If she is with Mars and Aries, on the contrary, she produces women, if she is in Capricorn or Aquarius. And when the old man had pursued this subject at great length, and had enumerated every kind of mathematical figure, and also the position of the heavenly bodies, wishing thereby to show that fear is not sufficient to restrain lust, I answered again, truly, my father, you have argued most learnedly and skillfully, and reason herself invites me to say something in answer to your discourse, since indeed I am acquainted with the science of mathematics, and gladly hold a conference with so learned a man. Listen therefore, while I reply to you what you have said, that you may learn distinctly that Genesis is not at all from the stars, and that it is possible for those to resist the assault of demons who have recourse to God. And as I said before, that not only by the fear of God can natural lust be restrained, but even by the fear of men, as we shall now instruct you. There are in every country or kingdom laws imposed by men, enduring either by writing or simply through custom, which no one easily transgresses. In short, the first Ceres, who dwell at the beginning of the world, have a law not to know murder, nor adultery, nor whoredom, and not to commit theft, and not to worship idols. And in all that country, which is very large, there is neither temple, nor image, nor harlot, nor adulteress, nor is any thief brought to trial. But neither is any man ever slain there. And no man's liberty of will is compelled, according to your doctrine, by the fiery star of Mars, to use the sword for murder of man, nor does Venus, in conjunction with Mars, compelled to adultery, although the course with them Mars occupies in the middle circle of heaven every day. But amongst the Ceres, the fear of laws is more powerful than the configuration of Genesis. There are likewise among the Bactrians in the Indian countries immense multitudes of Brahmins, who also themselves, from the tradition of their ancestors and peaceful customs and law, neither commit murder, nor adultery, nor worship idols, nor have the practice of eating animal food, which are never drunk, never do anything maliciously, but always fear God. And these things indeed they do, though the rest of the Indians commit both murders and adulteries, and worship idols, and are drunken, and practice other wickedness of this sort. Yea, in the western parts of India itself there is a certain country where strangers, when they enter it, are taken and slaughtered and eaten, and neither have good stars prevented these men from such wickedness, and from accursed food, nor have malign stars compelled the Brahmins to do any evil. Again, there is a custom among the Persians to marry mothers and sisters and daughters, and in all that district the Persians contract incestuous marriages, and that those who study mathematics may not have it in their power to use that subterfuge by which they say that there are certain districts of heaven to which it is granted to have some things peculiar to themselves. Some of that nation of Persians have gone to foreign countries, who are called Magaluse, of whom they are some to this day in Media, others in Parthia, some also in Egypt, and a considerable number in Galatia and Phrygia, of whom maintain the form of this incestuous tradition without variation, and hand it down to their posterity to be observed, even although they have changed their district of heaven. Nor has Venus with the moon in the confines and houses of Saturn, with Saturn also and Mars looking on, compelled them to have a genesis among other men. Amongst the Galli also there is a custom that women cultivate the fields, build, and do every manly work. And they are also allowed to have intercourse with whom they please, and they are not found fault with by their husbands, or called adulteresses. For they have promiscuous intercourse everywhere, and especially with strangers. They do not use ornaments, they do not wear dyed garments nor shoes. On the other hand, the men of the Galatones are adorned, combed, clothed in soft and various colored garments, decked with gold, and besmeared with ointments, and that not through lack of manliness, for they are most warlike and most keen hunters. Yet the whole women of the Galones had not at their birth the unfavorable Venus or Capricornus or Aquarius, nor had all the men Venus placed within Mars by Aries, by which configuration the Chaldean science asserts that men are born effeminate and dissolute. But further, in Suse, the women use ointments, and indeed the best of the best sort, being decked with ornaments, and precious stones. Also they go abroad, supported by the aid of their maidservants, with much greater ambition than the men. They do not, however, cultivate modesty, but have intercourse indifferently with whomever they please, with slaves and guests, such liberty being allowed them by their husbands. And not only are they not blamed for this, but they also rule over their husbands. And yet the genesis of all the Caesarean women has not Venus with Jupiter and Mars in the middle of the heaven in the houses of Jupiter? In the remoter parts of the East, if a boy be treated unnaturally, when it is discovered, he is killed by his brothers or his parents or any of his relations and is left unburied. And again, among the Gauls, an old law allows boys to thus be treated publicly, and no disgrace is thought to attach to it. And is it possible that all those who are so basely treated among the Gauls have had Lucifer with Mercury in the houses of Saturn and the confines of Mars? In the regions of Britain, several men have one wife. In Parthia, many women have one husband, and each part of the world adheres to its own manners and institutions. None of the Amazons have husbands, but like animals, they go out from their own territories once a year about the vernal equinox and live with the men of the neighboring nation, observing a sort of solemnity the while, and when they have conceived by them, they return. And if they bring forth a male child, they cast him away and rear only females. Now, since the birth of all is at one season, it is absurd to suppose that in the case of males, Mars is at the time in equal portions with Saturn, but never in the genesis of females, and that they have not Mercury placed with Venus in their own houses, so as to produce either painters or sculptors or money changers, or in the house of Venus, so that the perfumers or singers or poets may be produced. Among the Saracens and the upper Libyans and Moors and the dwellers about the mouth of the ocean, and also in the remote districts of Germany, and among the Samaritans and Scythians, and all the nations who dwell in the regions of the Pontic shore and on the island of Crescia, there is never found a money changer, nor sculptor, nor a painter, nor an architect, nor a geometrician, nor a tragedian, nor a poet. Therefore the influence of Mercury and Venus must be wanting among them. The Medes alone in the world, with the greatest care, throw men still breathing to be devoured by dogs, yet they have not Mars with the moon placed in Cancer all through their daily genesis. The Indians burn their dead and the wives of the dead voluntarily after themselves, and are not burned with them, and are burned with them. But all the Indian women who are burned alive have not the sun under the earth in nightly genesis with Mars in the regions of Mars. Very many of the Germans and their lives in the halter, but have not therefore the moon with Hora encompassed by Saturn and Mars. From all this it appears that the fear of laws bears sway in every country, and the free will which is implanted in man by the Spirit complies with the laws, and Genesis can neither compel the Ceres to commit murder, nor the Brahmins to eat flesh, nor the Persians to shun incest, nor the Indians to refrain from burning, nor the Medes from being devoured by dogs, nor the Parthians from having many wives, nor the women of Mesopotamia from preserving their chastity, nor the Greeks from athletic exercises, nor the Gallic boys from being abused, nor can it compel the barbarous nations to be instructed in the studies of the Greeks. But as we have said, each nation observes its own laws according to free will, and annuls the decrees of Genesis by the strictness of laws. But someone skilled in the science of mathematics will say Genesis is divided into 7 parts, which they call climates, and that over each climate one of the 7 heavenly bodies bears rule, and that those diverse laws to which we have referred are not given by men, but those dominant stars according to their will, and that which pleases the stars observed by men as a law. To this we shall answer in the first place that the world is not divided into 7 parts, and in the second place that if it were so, we find many different laws in one part and one country, and therefore there are neither 7 laws according to the number of the heavenly bodies, nor 12 according to the number of the signs, nor 36 according to that of the divisions of 10 degrees, but they are innumerable. Moreover, we ought to remember the things which have been mentioned, that the one country of India, there are both persons who feed on human flesh and persons who abstain even from the flesh of sheep and birds and all living creatures, and that the Magusei marry their mothers and daughters, not only in Persia, but in every nation where they dwell. They keep up their incestuous customs. Then, besides, we have mentioned also innumerable nations, which are wholly ignorant of the studies of literature, and also some wise men have changed the laws themselves in several places, and some laws have been voluntarily abandoned on account of the impossibility of observing them, or on account of their baseness. Assuredly, we can easily ascertain how many rulers have changed the laws and customs of nations which they have conquered and subjected them to their own laws. This is manifestly done by the Romans, who have brought under the Roman law all the civil decrees almost the whole world, and all nations who formerly lived under various laws and customs of their own. It follows, therefore, that the stars of the nations which have been conquered by the Romans have lost their climates and their portions. I shall add another thing which may satisfy even the most incredulous. All the Judeans who live under the law of Moses circumcise their sons on the 8th day without fail, and shed the blood of the tender infant. But no one of the Gentiles has ever submitted to this on the 8th day, and on the other hand, no one of the Judeans has ever omitted it. How then shall the account of Genesis stand with this, since the Judeans live in all parts of the world mixed with Gentiles, and on the 8th day suffer the cutting of a member? And no one of the Gentiles, but only they themselves, as I have said, do this, induced to it not by the compulsion of any star, nor by the profusion of blood, but by the law of their religion, and in whatever part of the world they are, this sign is familiar to them. But also the fact that one name is among them all, wheresoever they are. Does this also come through Genesis? And also that no child born among them is ever exposed, and on every 7th day they all rest, wherever they may be, and do not go upon a journey, and do not use fire. Why is it then that no one of the Judeans is compelled by any Genesis to go on a journey, or to build, or to sell, or to buy anything on that day? But I shall give still stronger proof of the matters in hand. For behold, scarcely 7 years have passed since the advent of the just and true prophet, and in the course of these, men of all nations, coming to Judea, and moved both by the signs and the miracles which they saw, and by the grandeur of his doctrine, received his faith. And then going back to their own countries, they rejected the lawless rites of the Gentiles and their incestuous marriages. In short, among the Parthians, as Thomas, who is preaching the gospel amongst them, has written to us, not many now are addicted to polygamy, nor among the Medes do many throw their dead to dogs, nor are the Persians pleased with intercourse with their mothers, or incestuous marriages with their daughters, nor did the Susian women practice the adulteries that were allowed to them, nor has the Genesis been able to force those into crimes whom the teaching of religion restrained. Behold, from the very matter in which we are now engaged, draw an inference, and from the circumstances in which we now placed deduce a conclusion, how through a rumor only reaching the ears of men that a prophet has appeared in Judea to teach men with signs and miracles to worship one God, all were expecting with prepared and eager minds, even before the coming of my master Peter, that someone should announce to them what he taught, who had appeared. But lest I should seem to carry the enumeration too far, I shall tell you what conclusion ought to be drawn from the whole. Since Yahweh is just, and since he himself made the nature of man, how could it be that he should place Genesis in opposition to us, which should compel us to sin, and then that he should punish us when we do sin? Whence it is certain that God punishes no sinner either in the present life or in that to come, except because he knows that he could have conquered but neglected victory. For even in the present world he takes vengeance upon men, as he did upon those who perished in the deluge, who were all destroyed in one day, yea, in 1 hour, although it is certain that they were not all born in 1 hour according to the order of Genesis. But it is most absurd to say that it befalls us by nature to suffer evils if sin had not gone before. Alright, so I think I probably need to stop. I believe we're getting close to the end of the book. So we'll go ahead and stop here, and we'll pick it up in chapter 31 next time. Shalom.